Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. When classes end, the strategic conversations you choose to have with your peers and your professors will make all the difference in the future you create for yourself. In this week's episode, we are joined by Tiffany Gipson, the Director of Equity and Quality for the California AfterSchool Network. Ms. Gipson encourages you to create a teacher-student partnership that will offer a safe space in your learning environment, while also developing your interests to ensure that you identify the right fit for your career choice. Enjoy. Today, we have a powerhouse. I mean, wow, we hit it off immediately. She's a beautiful spirit, and she is Miss Tiffany Gipson. How's it going, Miss Tiffany?
Hey there, Yoli. How you doing? Oh, no, without a doubt. We are on first name basis.
I love it. I love it.
I'm good. And thank you for having me. Seriously.
Yeah,
it's an honor.
Such an honor. Oh my God. For both of us, it's an honor. And I'm so grateful that Michael Funk introduced us. So I love to just jump right in. You know, we love to find out the motivation of the incredible guests that we have. And as a Director of Equity and Quality at the California AfterSchool Network, I just want to know what drew you to this field and, you know, what inspires you to serve young people.
So I didn't want to be here, right? That's the thing. I come from a family and long line of educators, right? Like my dad retired as a school administrator. My godfather, the same. They taught in between high schools and colleges and elementary schools and middle schools. My godmother was the dean at a university, like all of these educators. And I saw how hard the work was. We also were the house that got TP'd every, every Halloween because my dad really was that person, right? So I remember thinking like, I don't ever want to teach. Like, I just don't, it's just not for me. But I was a tutor when I was in college, right? And so working in those spaces, and then I started doing what we call youth development work and during like working in collaboration with like our community rec centers. And so I was just working around young people. And I was like, oh, I'm just doing this till I graduate. Then I'm good. Like I'm tired of y'all. I'm going to go do something else.
Right.
And then one day it was so funny. The principal worked at a continuation high school. I was a tutor in the classroom. It was a bunch of us. And so like each classroom would have 3 or 4 tutors easily. And so the principal looked at me and he was like, hey, I need you to take the CBEST because you're about to be finished. And I need someone to step into this classroom. And I was like, I don't want to do that. He said, you keep saying it, but this work is calling you and you need to make space for what's calling you. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Right. I was like, I don't care what you say. And then there was an amazing master teacher at this school. And she said, sometimes the path will come to you and it's up to you to pay attention to that. And she said, you're not the only person that's going to be able to serve and support young people. She said, but right now you are one of them. And she said, just hold that and you don't have to stay. And I was like, okay, right?
That was in your face.
Yeah, right. And it's because, and what I tell people is that it was her. Like I saw her transform young people like every day. I saw her take young people that were struggling to find any sense of belonging, any sense of care in an educational system, especially when you end up, because it's rare that young people choose to go to an alternative ed system, right?
Oh, wow, right.
And so for her, when they would walk into her space and to see these young people turn back into young people every day, and I was like, to me, that was the gift that I recognized first, that if there's someone that's doing that sees this and is willing to help me learn, nothing here can be bad from that, right? And so that's what I did. I stayed at that place. I worked in the classroom, and I still struggled with the fact that I felt like I wasn't being as effective because I would have to work so hard to help my students, because I was a math and science teacher, hold education as something relevant, right? That was a challenge because most of my students had children. Most of my students were already engaged with the juvenile justice system. Most of my students were making adult decisions on a regular basis. And so what I started to realize was, how do I make this educational context align with what they have to deal with every day? So that took me out of the classroom. That's when I started doing counseling, right? And then through that work, expanded learning kind of found me because I kept having these opportunities to say, where can we use the structure of the school day, like the fact that students have to be here, but make it where it's a choice for them to be here because it's actually meeting their needs. And that's what expanded learning did. It created this space where there was still a tangible connection to the school day, but I was actually being able to share information and skills and strategies that felt relevant to young people, how to navigate just their lives and how to make this learning applicable and make sense. So that whole kind of weaving path created what I am now. And that's when we all refer to as a community educator. But truthfully, it's a youth development practitioner, someone that looks at young people as whole and complete and beautiful as they come into the space, and understand that my role as an ally is to resource them up to be who they really want to be in the spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember when we spoke before and we were prepping, and you had said that, students can still be successful on an alternative path, and that you really emphasize that when you talk to them. So that's like creating this authentic space. We hear the word safe spaces all the time, but it feels like you're creating authentic spaces, and that's powerful.
yeah, and it's funny, like even that framing of safe space. What we really work hard to make are spaces where young people are allowed to be brave, right? Because adults don't always do a good job of creating safety for young people.
Right.
And I think like I said, this is one of the beauties of expanded learning. Like, we talk crazy about this time of day is really what it is, right? It is before school, especially in California, it's an ed code. It's before school, it's after school, and it's intercession and summer. So those winter breaks, those Thanksgiving breaks, spring break, and all of summer. And it's, how do we look at structures where, especially marginalized communities, so our indigenous young people, our Black and brown ones, right? How do we really pay attention to creating spaces where they feel seen, where they feel not just, oh, there's a space for them, but they belong in the space that's offered for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so if we're able to do that, learning can happen. But if I don't feel safe, if I don't feel like you truly and authentically see me, why would I listen to you?
Right.
Right? Like, because one of the things that I really learned at the end of my teaching was, it was a reciprocal relationship, right? Like, I had to have something to share, but they wanted to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just me standing up saying a bunch of stuff, right? And I was like, and for the longest time, I kept trying to, like, how do I reframe this conversation that, to me, education is not so much about teaching as much as it is about learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that for us to actually learn together, we have to be in relationship together. And so before we get to that, I need to be able to honor how you come into every space. Everything that comes into the room with you, I need to be able to acknowledge that. Doesn't mean that I have to own it. It doesn't mean it's my responsibility to even help you fix it all. But it is my responsibility as an educator in the space to acknowledge that I understand that when you come into the room, all of you comes in. You don't get to leave part of you outside of it. And so then if I really want you to learn in my space, then I create a space that can hold all of you, just like it has to hold all of me.
Wow. Wow. That takes a lot of maturity to do what you're what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like you said, not everybody, not every educator knows how to create a safe space because they're dealing with their own stuff. And they bring all their anxiety and their insecurity and bias to the classroom. So you're shut off.
All of it. And just think about what you do every day in a classroom, right? The fact that in my staff meetings right now, we start with a check-in, and we're adults that should, be pretty emotionally regulated
Right.
and, all of the stuff. But we still start with, how are you today? Are you good? Because if you're not good, I need you to let me know so that as your colleague and partner, I can figure out how to support you today. Right. Now that's me being grown and real grown because I'm old.
Right.
Right. And so if we don't teach young people that too, because it's a skill set, right? Like everybody talks about, and it's especially using Castle and their wheel, that self-awareness and self-management are skill sets that are taught, right? Like I have to be able to identify there's a difference between something that happens and then how I respond to what happens to me. And so to be able to kind of distinguish those things and be like, oh, someone just did something or said something that I don't really like. And then to acknowledge that, and I have a complete choice in how I respond to that. I can't control what someone else did.
Yes.
But I can always control me and how I show up in the room and how I respond.
And sometimes they don't know how to show up. I mean, like you said, they don't have the skills. And so, when you and I were talking about some other things related to learning, you discussed something called interest-driven learning. And so you mentioned that there's a right fit approach to it. And so I wanted to know for students, considering ways to even consider college, because, vocational options are there. But for those that are interested in college, can we tap into this interest-driven learning? What did you mean, and what is that? And is that one of the skills that you're talking about?
Well, and it's so interesting, right? Like think about just how K-12 is designed, how our community college and university system, just how the structure and design of it is. And it's so interesting to me that, when we as adults really get to really hone in and focus on what we want to learn, it's at the graduate school level. Like that's really when you get to dig in. Where in the world does that make sense? So I've had to literally use 6 figures of income that I do not have to finally figure out where I want to place my interest and my effort, like where I want those things to meet. It's one of the biggest things. So we, in expanded learning, we have the quality standards, but in those standards, there's one that is all around youth voice and leadership. And what that really means is young people get to define who they are and what they want to learn. And then the structure of the work is to meet them there. So the same thing though, I realized, and this is because, like I said, when I worked at the continuation school, I supported the senior class of students. And at a continuation school, that's a very wide range of students because they have different units. There's all kinds of stuff, right? But what I kept trying to help them unpack was, yes, for me, college was a path, right? That made perfect sense. But what I also saw was that I had other colleagues that wasn't the path, and they are equally as successful in their own right. And so when I started talking to my students, I was like, well, let's explore that. And they were like, well, I'll never forget one young man, he was like, well, Tiffany, I was told if I don't go to college, I'm never going to be nothing. And I was like, where'd you take your car to be fixed? That's somebody. Where's the person that fixed the leak in your house? That's somebody. And I was like, and these are all skills and talents that are needed for us to just live our lives. So let's be clear. Every lived experience counts for something. And so if college isn't for you, there's other ways for you to be successful. And in a country, not to get on all the isms that plague us. But if you are an African American young man, a lot of your opportunities shrink just because of who you are in this country. So you have to be really strategic with knowing what are all the things that make up how I want to navigate this world. And so, like for us, the whole conversation around like interest driven stuff really is specific. It's like you have to figure out what you like and love, and then what you're naturally gifted and talented as, because we all have those things. And then you start to see, where is there some level of overlap, or where can I leverage one to get me to the other? So if there's something that I really am good at, but there's something over there that I love, how do I use these skills that I'm good at to get me over there? And then you start to say, well, the learning that needs to happen for me to get from my talent to a skill, is that taught in college? Is that taught through a training program? Is that a certification? Is that an apprenticeship model where I go study under someone that is really good and that does that, right? Like, what are all of those different things that I need to pay attention to? And that's how you start to explore like right fit through interest driven. And that same concept happens with, so let's say you're now clear and it's like, okay, well, what I really want to do, like I had a lot of young people that I thought were really interesting. They would say stuff like, I like to do stuff with my hands, and I like to like figure out how to make something better. And I was like, really, let's kind of talk through that. Now, what they didn't realize is that's an engineering mindset off rip. Like, but no one's ever said that to them. And I said, so let's explore what it really means to be an engineer, and all the different types and all the different, whatever. And then what I realized is me talking to them about it wasn't enough, because it still wasn't like a real option for them.
Tangible. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then I started saying, well, you know what I can do? There is a Black Engineers Club at Cal, because the school I worked at was in Berkeley. And I was like, I reached out to some friends and I was like, hey, can you come and talk to these young people? And they were like, oh, Tiff, like it's nothing. And it's so interesting how our communities really will create a village for young people if we let them.
Yes.
And so now I have them looking at people that look just like them, saying, oh, yeah, no, I grew up in East Oakland, and this is what my life was like. And then I realized in my junior year that I needed something to be different. And so I really focused on this and this. And then I got to school and it wasn't easy. And I had friends that actually told them their authentic path, right? Like I had to go to a community college first, and because I needed to get my grades up because I didn't have all the prerequisites. And then I did that, but not realizing that saved me money by getting those 2.5, 3 years, because they were never able to do it in 2, because community college had them taking a whole year's worth of courses that didn't count towards transfer, right? So all of these experiences. But next thing you know, he's like, but then I ended up here. And then I had a network of people. And now I have a village that was supporting me. And then I got an internship. And then next thing you know, and right now, this is someone that's doing work at NASA, right? So it's those things that I think, like when we say interest driven first, then right fit comes, because then you can start to see like, okay, well, if the path is going to college, what does that look like for me? Because it doesn't always mean that you're going to go to the 4-year university of your dreams first. But it does mean that if you have to go, let's say the community college route, and this is the interesting thing, like it's some work that we're trying to do now, is going the apprenticeship route, where you can earn college credits for the prior knowledge and prior experience. You can translate some of that learning into actual units, but also you take a couple of courses while you're in the apprenticeship model, which means that you're getting paid while you're learning. And then you have access to all the supports that community colleges offer. But it's like all of a sudden, young people are able to dream a different path for themselves. Let's pay attention to not so much the standardized test, but let's look at our young people holistically to understand, how did they get to this place, and how do we help them pass this place so that they can have the kind of success that they should have. And a lot of that I feel like it's the mental work, not only with the young people, but also with the educators who are tasked with holding them. Like I worked in a school where it was like one of the teachers, he had just given up, not only on them, but on himself.
Mm.
Right? Like he came to work every day, but that's all you get.
That paycheck.
He came, right? He came. And that energy that he put out in his classroom is exactly how the students met him. Right? That's exactly how they showed up. They lived down to his expectations daily.
Wow, lived down.
Right? And then I would see them leave his classroom and walk over to Miss Wagner's classroom and really try to be who they really wanted to be and how they wanted to be seen. And they were holding themselves differently. They spoke differently, like everything. And that's when I realized how powerful it is for us to look at our young people every day with hope in our eyes for them. Because without that, right, we're their mirror.
Yes.
We're there. That is exactly what we are until they can hold it for themselves. That's how important I believe education really is. That the hardest thing I tell people that I did was that working in a classroom, because I kept feeling like I just can't do all of the things that they need done. But that's when I realized, well, that's because, dummy, it's not your job to do it all.
Right.
It's your job to activate all these other resources, though, so that when your young people get to you, they can actually learn. But that means that I had to shift how I held my classroom. That meant I changed how we started our days. Like we did a circle every day to start it. Like I needed to know, like, how are you doing? I had young people that worked all night and still came to school. And so they would be sleepy in the morning. And one teacher, she was like, I keep putting him out of my classroom because he's asleep. And I was like, well, why can't we give him a different first period so he can go to sleep? Because he's still coming to school. Like that was, I was like, that's the part you missed.
He's showing up. He's showing up.
He still came here, right? So it's that part of all the other things. The importance, I believe, of interest-driven learning, because I do believe that once you activate in people what they are genuinely interested in, and you help them align that with what they would like to do and learn and be, there's an amazing kind of connection that happens with that. The synergy is what I was thinking. And that also aligns with the whole concept of like what right fit really means. And it's so funny. When I first started using the framing of right fit, it was really about how to find the right college experience for students, right? I had them ask questions around, well, academically, does it offer the courses that you want to take? Or does it have the major that you're really interested in? And then it would say things like, and does it have the kind of social activities that you would like to experience? Because what I kept seeing when I first started was I was working at the continuation school, and I'm trying to get a lot of these young people, the way I framed it was, I'm trying to get y'all out of the hood to a different kind of hood. I wanted them to go and look at HBCUs, because I was like, one of the things that I think you all need to see is to be around young Black people they may be coming to college for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that they're going to college. And do you know what it feels like to be surrounded by people that look just like you that are in college?
Aspiring to be great, yeah.
Right? That are honoring themselves as learners just off top because you're here. Everything else is gravy. You got here though. And I was like, and I think you all need to see that. And so, but what I also realized is it's kind of hard to send a kid from East Oakland to a small rural HBCU in the middle of Alabama.
Right.
Right. So that because the social aspect wasn't enough, and he didn't have enough family and community to hold him as he grew into being an adult. And I said, but, and I told him, I said, well, where do you have family? He's like, well, I've got family in Baton Rouge. And I was like, well, Why don't we look at Southern University? It's a slightly larger campus, right? You have family that you can immediately connect to. And, you've got an aunt who's already telling you, you coming over for dinner every Sunday. Like if you come down here, right? Like all of these things that make college easier. And I was dealing with students that they were going to be first gen college students. And so no one in their family could tell them what it's like to navigate the financial aid line. No one could tell them what it was like when your housing didn't come through and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got to go stand in line to go get my stuff those were things that no one in their family had experienced. So they couldn't tell them about that. It's like, how do we make sure that you have support so that you don't leave when you're faced with something you don't know? Part of the work that I used to do way back then was students that wanted to go to a specific college or university. I would find their local alumni association here and have their parents come to a conversation with the alumni that's local. So they could show them here's how we support students from here that go there. Because a lot of HBCUs have that. And that was something that the mom didn't even know that could be accessed, right? Like, then that's what made her say, oh, I just didn't know that there would be, other people that would understand my baby's experience, right? And be willing to support. And they're like, no, she can go there. And my auntie lives there, or my daughter's in that school, and we'll introduce them and we'll make sure that they have a connection point, right? Like all of that, though, plays a part into that conversation about right fit. And what I found that's really interesting is, and that doesn't have to start at college. It can start before that. Young people can start having real conversations about the kind of high school experience they want to have, right? Like they can start to really be more strategic about what is the kind of learning that I want to do. Like some schools have academies. One of the things that we've seen, and I use Oakland as a good example, that if you don't make students fully aware of the academies coming into their freshman year, they may not take their learning seriously, so that when it's time for them to shift into some of the academies in their junior and senior years, they may not have the grades. They may not have taken the right prerequisites, even for that kind of strategy. We have other places where for young people to get into a specific high school kind of program, they can't do that because no one told them that they needed to have this kind of GPA in middle school.
Right.
So they're taken out of the running even before they knew there was a race. So to me, that's part of it. Like the conversation about right fit is really about readiness. Like how are we helping our young people be ready for opportunities if they don't even know those opportunities exist?
Powerful. I was sitting here thinking those very things because I'm like, if there's a student that's not exposed to a teacher like yourself, that's passionate about them finding their authentic voice and finding their authentic selves, they have to be an informed student nowadays. You know what I mean? And I just
Yeah.
had this conversation with a nutritionist about being an informed patient. You have to go into the doctor's office with the questions. So I feel like in the classroom, and based on this conversation, students are going to have to start really thinking prior to entering the classroom, because as you said, adult SEL is in need for a lot of teachers. I heard that real clear. And I feel like you got to come back and we have to do adult SEL series, but that's a whole nother topic. But when I heard that, I was like, wow, these students do have to come informed. And so my question to you is, this audience is that an incoming freshman going into college with all that anxious anxiety. So that does mean it's a high school senior making that decision. And then we have those graduates heading out to the workforce that are still dealing with conflict resolution and finding themselves, as you said. So with interest-driven learning, I'm thinking, and what I'm hearing is that students should require from their professors, a certain learning experience, or they should go in there with certain questions so that it kind of triggers discernment on the teacher's part. Does that make sense? Like, okay, this child is trying to connect with me on this level, but as far as the type of questions, That's what I want to ask you. What type of questions should a student walk in the classroom, meeting a new professor for the first time? What should be on their mind to help collaborate in this new learning experience?
So I don't believe that every professor is going to navigate that question the way that I would want them to, right? So I'm just going to say that out loud. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that it's because they are or aren't anything. I'm saying because we work in systems and structures that have such highly compliance driven outcomes and outputs that impact isn't always at the forefront of how they look at what they're doing. So I'm going to say all that and put that over on the side. However, most of the people that I know that are teaching right now in high schools, community colleges, and colleges and universities all over this country, they are willing to be that kind of partner with students and learning. And the first thing that I would say to any student is critical thinking and analysis 101. Read the syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
Like for real. Read that thing that they're going to give you that says what this class is going to be about so that you can then come into that space and ask the questions about not only what you're going to learn, but how does that learning benefit you?
Mm.
What is that learning going to help you be able to do in the world that we exist in at this moment? Right? And going in really transparently and saying, I am trying to make the best out of out of this class and my experience. And so what I'm asking from you is, what are the things that I need to come into the space prepared to know, do, and be? Because I think that's always important. Like everyone likes to say, oh, young people need to know this. Young people need to do that. I'm like, but the truth is, a lot of us have expectations about how we want students to be in our presence.
Right.
And sometimes adults don't call that unless someone elevates to them that, wait a second, I'm getting penalized because I keep asking questions.
Mm.
But in the beginning, you said that you wanted us to be like inquisitive and curious. And so let's be clear about what that means, because that's another part that I think we just don't give as much credit to students about. Like they really are trying to figure out how to learn. And it's so interesting. Once you get to college, it's like people just get to say, well, you know, and your professors just get to sit up front and say the things they want to say and do the things they want to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's not the professors that I've learned the most from.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I've learned the most from created space for me to ask the most questions.
Right.
To really be able to challenge learnings and conversations. And I think most importantly, though, and they were thick-skinned enough to know that they also could learn from the students in the space as well.
Period. And to me, that's the point. It's supposed to be a reciprocal, collaborative conversation. There's nothing to hide. You know, there's so much fear around who we are and all these different conversations. And like you just said, if you can go into a classroom and say, how does this subject affect me? Wow, hands down, that should be the orientation conference. Okay.
Right? Just think about it. And I told somebody, I said, I consider myself so lucky that almost every time I sit in a room with a young person, and when I say that, I mean it could be somebody that's 5, and they say something, because I feel like kindergarten kids make you see the world so differently sometimes. And once I said that, because I told someone, like, I have literally worked with every age level, and I told people, little kids taught me patience. Middle school kids taught me I didn't want to work with them no more. High school kids taught me that being an adult and being at a certain, like being 18 doesn't make you an adult. When you have to make adult decisions, you get to be treated like an adult in some cases, right? And so the truth about being able to sit in honest relationship with young people and say, this is the course that I've designed, right? This is what you're here to learn. Here's some things that I'm going to actually explore. However, If there's something else that you all feel needs to be in this conversation, we need to be in that kind of relationship where that gets elevated into this learning space. The really good professors that I have seen them shift course syllabus after a really interesting semester with a group of students that made them shift, like maybe the books that they chose to some other books, right? Or just the way that they framed some of the kind of conversations. Because, like you said, and you just really briefly said it, we all come into every room with our own biases. We come into the room with all of our preconceived notions. We come into the rooms with our own lived and learned experiences. However, all of those things are still subject to change every time we meet new people.
If we're open to it, absolutely.
Yeah. If we're open to it. And I think when you agree to be an educator, I believe that's the contract that you signed.
Yes, that's what you signed up to do.
Yeah, that's what you signed up to do.
This is so good. Woo, we can go on. And I'm gonna have you back because you went to a whole nother place with the adult
I know.
SEL.
I feel like we had a whole thing. So to everyone who finally watches this, we had a whole nother thing and direction we were going to take some of this. And then at the last minute, I was like, well, can we make some slight shifts? And so, yeah, so we've had a completely different conversation all over again.
So that just means you'll be back for some more good stuff. But I always like to wrap up with final words of encouragement. And I'm just thinking when you said, what is it I am to get out of this syllabus for my life? That's a specific question for a student that's listening. And so I'm just thinking about encouraging words for that person that just might be unsure about their purpose and their need for even college. Because as you said before, there are apprenticeships, and that is definitely a positive option. But do you feel that college should be still a super strong consideration for our listeners?
I believe that our current K 12 educational system should make it where college is, can be, and should be an option for every student. Now, whether they choose to do it, that's up to them, but they should not have that option removed because we haven't held the kind of learning experiences for them so that they were ready, right? Like that's one of the really interesting things that's coming out in some new data around. We have a lot of students that couldn't apply to either CSU or the UC system. And one of the things that I realized though is that, but some of those students, that's a choice they've made. They didn't take these courses because they knew they were going to this path. But because we don't measure those paths the same, they didn't include that in the data pool when they were saying those kind of just arbitrary data points. So I think, should college be an option for every student? Yes. And that means that we need to equip every student with what they need to go be successful. Do I believe, though, that that is the path that they have to choose to have success? No, I don't. I think that we are seeing now that, and I say this all the time to teachers and trainings, teachers that feel like our job is to share information with students, that kind of thinking is outdated because the average student has access to more information than any one teacher knows with opening an app on their phone. Our job, work, and role is to teach discernment of information. I think that's just critical. And then how to think critically and how to analyze those things so that young people can understand all of that data, because data is just that. It doesn't mean that it's factual. It doesn't mean that it's not always someone's opinion, right? We need to be able to help our young people like really sift through this, because for whatever reason, we've gotten to a place where opinions and facts people feel like are always synonymous, and they aren't. I can look out right now and say the sky is red and I know it to be. And somebody can be like, well, that's Tiffany's opinion. It just because it's my opinion don't make it right. Like, so I think that that's helping, but truthfully, right? Like, and I'm saying this about young people, but I'm saying it about young people because I'm seeing it with adults that don't have that level of discernment. So helping our young people figure that kind of stuff out, I think is so critical. because that then helps them make those real decisions. It's a lot of, I was at a school in Silicon Valley, and one of the students was clear. He was like, I am not going to invest $250,000 to go to college. He was so clear. I'm about to take this. It was a Google class, something, something, a certification. He said, I can take it. This is his plan. He's like, I'm going to take it my second semester of high school. I'll be fully certified by the time I graduate. I'm going to take an entry level position here. They have Google University. I can take more courses once I'm there, and I'm working like completely different plan. And when someone asked him, but what about college? He said, what's over there that I won't get over here? And I won't incur that level of debt, and I'll get blah, 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 blah. Now, after he showed us the plan, and I was like, okay, so that first step means that you have to get in and get hired. And how many people apply for those jobs versus how many people get in? And he was like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I didn't think about that part. Right. And I was like, and this is part of the reason why, to me, when you go to college and you get the internships so that you have more opportunities for employment afterwards, like all of these things, you have to think them through. So that's why I'm saying I don't think there's a right or a wrong path. I think there's a better path for each student, and they have to do the work to help figure out what's the right fit for them.
This is good. So for those that are listening, get a hold of that syllabus. And I would say set up a real first conference with a professor. Like, when they set up those office hours, get in there and have a meeting like the first month so that you're on the right track.
Yeah. But imagine if no one told you that, like, every one of them has office hours, right? And if they don't do them, they have a TA. And then if they're not in there, you go meet with that TA and you figure out what coffee that TA drinks, and you sit down with them and say, because they're probably the person that's actually grading your paper. And so what are the things that they're looking for? Right? Like, being able to understand the structures to navigate are what's really helpful. The fact that it's so funny, students don't realize that there's tutoring available at most of their colleges and universities. They don't understand that there's someone there that's supposed to help you with, like, if you are a student in California and you have transportation issues, depending on what your financial aid status is, you may have access to free like buses and in the Bay Area BART and transfers. It's all of these things. But if you don't know that those resources and supports are there for you, you probably would feel like, I am just all alone trying to figure this out. And you're not. Like, when you said, like, what's the final words of encouragement? When you sent me that earlier, I was like, what would I really want a young person to kind of walk away? And it was like, believe in yourself, right? Off top, know that who you are and whatever lived experiences you've had to this moment, they don't define you. They're part of chapters of your life. But your life keeps moving. Use them, learn from them, right? But to do that, that means you also need to find a village, no matter where you are. You need to find a group of people who are not only nice and kind to you in your face, but when you're not there, they got your back. People that are speaking well of you when you're not in rooms. People that are willing to, like, and this is a good college kind of threshold. When you have a test in the morning and you ain't studied and there's a party tonight or going and studying, who's the one that says, okay, we can study for like 2 hours and then we can go out and then we'll just go make a peek and then we'll come back? Or who's the one that's like, you ain't got to study? Like, we ain't got to do that, right? Like, you need to pay attention to what that looks like. And it doesn't mean that person doesn't mean you well. It just means that you may have a friend that's like, oh, I don't really need to study. Like, that's something I love that class. I'm good at it. But that may be the one that you struggle with. Like, how do you say, oh, wait, nah, I'm going to have to study. And they're going to be like, all right, we got you. We can go out next week, right? Like, how do you start really creating that discernment word, really looking at who are the people that should start making up your village?
Yes, very powerful. Your village.
Right? Because there is so much power in the village that we surround ourselves with.
And you just some tips for really an introduction to networking when you said, have the office hour meeting, meet the TA. I mean, these are networking skills that you're laying down because they're going to transfer over into the workforce, identifying and discerning who are the employees to align yourself with, who's going to really help. This was good stuff. So I hope everybody is listening. I mean, wow. You know what I mean? So, I mean, speaking of network, you are, as we said, a director of equity and quality at the California AfterSchool Network. So if students want to, because you're an incredible mentor, my goodness, for adults and young folks. So if they want to reach out to you and just learn more about the network, where can we send them?
So I think Michael put our website up already, but it's the afterschoolnetwork.org. Reach out, and honestly, I think my contact stuff is on there. So here's what I will say. Send an email. If there's a specific question, if there's something, I'm so open to answering it. No, it might take me a minute because I travel a lot. And I was gone last week to Milwaukee and I have 250 emails left to process, to go through. So it might take a second.
Okay. And what's the best email address? What's the best one?
It's the email address is lowercase T Gipson, GIP as in Peter, SON at afterschoolnetwork.org.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a pleasure. My goodness. Thank you so much. Woo!
No, thank you.
You're an incredible village member. How about it?
Hey, I try, but I think we need to also give you credit for creating a platform like this because young people don't always get centered in conversations like this. So thank you, Yoli. Great
the
work.
Students have inspired it. Hey, we help each other. So here we are.
That's right.
Appreciate you.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to be in touch with you and appreciate you. Happy Women's History Month.
That's right. Same to you.
Thank you for joining us. You have a right to a reciprocal relationship with your professors. So generate your list of questions and take full advantage of their office hours. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group, or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.